All right, joining the podcast is one of the most respected and authentic voices in sports media. She is an ESPN sideline reporter, a storyteller, an author, former athlete at Rutgers, and someone whose journey has inspired so many on and off the field. It's Miss Lauren Sisler. Hello, friend. How are you?
Hi, friend. I love that. The introduction. Wow, I feel special. Hanging out here, doing this thing, like figuring out this whole off season thing. I know everybody's like the million dollar question, what do you do in the off season? I'm just soaking it up, buddy. Soaking it up.
For sure. Well, before I answer or ask my questions, I do have to ask, have you added any dance moves to the repertoire lately?
Yeah, I feel like that has been trying to figure that out. I actually was just doing a tennis clinic earlier. So I'm picking up tennis, former gymnast, trying to stay athletic. And I told my coach, Coach Joey, I said, so do you think it would be intimidating because I try to stay loose. Like that's the reason for the sideline shimmy, right? Try to stay loose. I said, would it be intimidating to the opponent if like before each serve and like each set that I actually like got out there and like was like dancing around and stuff just to, move my body, keep it loose. And he's like, absolutely. So I don't know. I might try a new tactic. It might benefit me. Who knows?
It'd definitely be a distraction for sure. Like the who
A
was
good
that?
discretion.
Was
Yeah.
that Oregon and who was the other team? Their big thing was like jump around, and Dan Lanning was like, "We're gonna make that our thing." So when they play that in
Well,
the stadium, yeah,
Wisconsin does it. They're the ones that kind of like that. That's their thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you're obviously speaking of the sideline shimmy. You're obviously on the sidelines for a lot of the games and stuff. What's been the biggest takeaway that you have learned from that, besides the obvious of, get out of the way and don't get run over?
Just the biggest takeaway of being on the sidelines and like
Yeah, I mean,
just
obviously, you're down there and you can hear, the team and the atmosphere, but what do you personally like about being down there as a reporter?
yeah. I mean, obviously the tradition and pageantry is awesome. I think because we do get that sort of like I'm the eyes and ears on the field, right? So even the guys in the booth, like sometimes they can see things I don't see because they're seeing it from like the other sideline.
Mhm.
But for me, like I'm seeing like the microscopic stuff sometimes. And I think that's what the cool part is. It's just even the interactions with the players and the coaches and some of the language down there can get a little dicey at times. It's always funny, like especially as a reporter when I'm behind the bench and like my job. And I actually had it's actually interesting. Folks in the Birmingham area will know this, but Coach Garrick McGee, UAB's former head football coach, had asked me one time because he was, I believe, the receivers coach at Purdue, I believe. If I'm making sense of all that, it all runs together. But I remember being behind the bench and he came up to me after the game and was like, "So what is it exactly you're looking for?" And I thought it was interesting because it's the first time a coach has ever like asked me like, "Hey, what are you actually looking for back there?" And really a lot of it is just being in kind of in the trenches with the guys. Like I'm not like they've got their iPads now, of course, their boards and stuff, and they're drawing up plays and talking about different schemes and stuff like that. I'm not necessarily locked in on that. Now, if you're Cole Kublik, who's like the analyst on the field, he's obviously A plus, amazing at it. He's going to be down there just like analyzing the heck out of everything. Well, obviously, me, I'm kind of just drawing from it stories, maybe certain themes, common things that coaches are saying that are like, maybe areas of improvement, things they're looking for, even just like personality things, like things that the guys are saying to each other that might be funny, because really it gives you insight into not just like what's happening on the field, but like the personality of the team and what's happening behind the scenes, which I think is really cool. And so that's probably the part that I love is just I get to see and hear a lot of things. And like I said, sometimes I'm having to filter it out myself because things are said like, coaches are like, get your rear end back out on the field and don't screw this up. But there's a
No,
lot of
yeah.
beep, 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 beep in between. Um, but I think that's kind of the cool part of getting to see that in the interaction. And especially when you see players that have gone down, that have had injuries or, struggled with certain things, it's kind of cool to see them back out there coaching up their teammates and still being part of the game in a different capacity. And, just kind of watching that, and especially like, for an example, like if a quarterback goes down, then the other quarterback has to go in. And then that quarterback that was injured, maybe they go to locker room, come back, and then just seeing them coaching up their guy now and being in that coaching role. Like I think that type of stuff to me is just always very intriguing and fun to watch.
What's the kind of unspoken rule of being on the sideline where like you don't want to pry too much, but then like you want to still get that intel? And then
Oh,
also like during
yeah.
the halftime or after the game, what if a coach is super pissed off? Like how do you kind of go about getting that interview?
Oh yeah, I mean it's tough. So unspoken rule. It's funny because especially when injuries do happen, they have the injury tent now, so like the tent goes up, whoop, right? Well, it's still my job to kind of hang out by the tent and sort of wait to see what happens, watch to see when the player comes out. Are they limping? Are they holding a part of their body? Are they going to the locker room to be further evaluated? Like there's so many different elements to that. And it is funny because, you'll get like kind of the look from the trainer sometimes of like back up,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing. So, that's kind of interesting. And I will say sometimes I'm probably tipping my hat a little bit, but like, if I have the microphone in my hand and I've got like my clipboard or whatever, and I'll kind of just like, sometimes just kind of be gazing off into the distance so it doesn't look like I'm like fully focused on like the tent and like all up in their business.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the less conspicuous you look, the better. So sometimes it's just continuing to move and to kind of to assess the entire situation versus like honing in on one area. Because some coaches too, even if I'm behind the bench, like they get a little bit paranoid sometimes of like, well, what is she doing back here? What is she hearing? What is she saying? What is she telling people up in the booth or on the air, right, about what's going on here? So, it's kind of interesting. But then, like, of course, for halftime interviews and post game, in terms of like how you're getting interviews, I mean, I'll never forget this. I laugh. Like, what was like an interesting moment. Mike Leach, rest his soul, when he was over at Washington State, it was funny because he comes running off the field and like he knew like we were doing our interview and I'm like standing right there and he just runs right past me, like totally ducks me. And so I take off running because they're like tossing it down to me, hey, Lauren's down there with Mike Leach. And I said, hold up a sec, guys, like gotta get to him. He just ducked me, y'all. And so you just call it what it is. And then he finally slowed down, but it was just really funny how that sometimes happened. And I don't think he was really pissed off, really. It's just Mike Leach, like, come on, Mike Leach is just a one of a kind, one of one. So that's always interesting. But, definitely when coaches are not happy, I've even seen coaches like they win a football game because typically we're interviewing them after a win. But they might have given up like 20 points at the end of the game and they're not happy about it. And so while you think like, oh, we're going to celebrate this victory, it's not always like victorious and like all happy go lucky, positive, whatever. So, you kind of just have to lean in and let them talk and give you their best stuff. And sometimes they're short answers and that speaks volumes as well. I mean, sometimes a one word or a one sentence answer kind of tells the story of the game as well.
Mike Leach is definitely the most interesting football coach of all time, for sure.
Oh, I
Greatest quotes,
know.
funniest guy ever.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, and like you sit down in a meeting with him, you just never really talked about football. It was like just everything else. I mean,
he had like a law
but I think
degree or
that,
something.
what'd you say?
He had like a law background
Yeah,
or something.
yeah. And,
Yeah.
and the thing is, he was a professor. Like he actually like a football coach, like like teaching a class. And so like his class was like, I don't know, sold out like at capacity every semester because everybody wanted to be in his class. And so
What a cool
um
guy.
yeah, definitely miss Coach Leach for sure.
Well, if that's an interesting story from the sidelines, what's been like your most awkward encounter? Have you ever had a coach or a trainer be like, "Hey, look, you gotta get
Oh
out of here."
yeah. I mean, sometimes they'll get because usually there's a police presence there as well. So, like, they'll have the security that are there for the coaches specifically. So, a lot of times we'll have those conversations. Like, the security will ask me, like, before we're going to the locker room, how are you planning to get coach going in the locker room? Because they're walking into the locker room with them. Right. And so it's kind of this whole thing of just like, just a safety measure, but letting them know, like, hey, I'm coming, whatever. I'm going to come interview them. But I think one awkward encounter, and it's funny because I actually adore Coach Leipold at Kansas, and he's someone that I've grown to love. as a coach and as a person. And he just takes interest. Like he shows up to the meetings. He knows who he's talking to. I have a lot of respect for coaches that show up with, knowledge of the reporters that are going to be, covering the game, the analysts, the play by play, because to me, like they're doing their homework too. And granted, like they might have someone that's handing off that information, but it's important to them for them to know, like, these are the people covering my game. And like, I think that's cool. And it's funny because back when Coach Leipold was at Buffalo, I was doing it was actually during COVID times, which was like also very weird. That whole situation where like headsets on, like I'm interviewing them from like a million miles away, it felt like. But I remember there was also a lot of opt-outs happening. And so that was kind of like the concern, like because of HIPAA and because of all the things, like that was also before like NIL and a lot of information was available, like injuries and all that stuff. Everybody keeps stuff close to the vest, especially back then. And I remember him coming off the field at halftime, and their star player was not playing, had opted out. We knew he had opted out. Like we knew he wasn't going to play. And so one of their, secondary running backs had really stepped up and was playing well in that first half. So I prefaced the question by saying, like, and obviously can't remember the name specifically, but I was like, your star running back is out of the game. However, and as I was saying, your star running back was out of the game, I guess he was worried that I was going to ask him like specifically, why is he not playing? Which I wasn't. Like at that point, it's a moot point, like move on. Right. But he turned and looked at his SID, the sports information director. And I remember the SID was over there doing this to me, like basically saying like, don't ask the question. So we're on live TV and I'm literally getting this hand signal, like stop. And I'm like, so I literally just like froze in the middle of my question. I was like, and how? And then he just kind of answered the question. He really answered the question the way I would have asked it, but it was just such an awkward moment because I'm like, dude, like, what just happened? And I think again, it was just funny because Leipold like darted the look at his SID, like, you're supposed to protect me from these questions. Why is she asking me this question? And so it was just funny. So I kind of joke about that with him just because it was just a very awkward moment. I just like froze on TV. I was like,
Yeah, I was about to
what else
ask,
do
have
I
you?
say?
Yeah, for sure. I was about to ask, have you seen him since then and kind of asked
Yeah.
him about that? Yeah.
Yeah, we have. I've covered several games. I had him last year actually at West Virginia, and it was a terrible game in the sense that ended up being a massive like weather delay, like multiple hours. I want to say like 5 hours. It was terrible. So we were like huddled up. ESPN, like typically when there's like a rain or weather delay, like a lot of times we have like a shelter, that we're supposed to take as well if we're on the field. So whether that's just go up to the press box or go somewhere like in the locker room on the sideline, whatever, but it's got to be like undercover. So actually, a lot of times I end up in the visiting locker room, mostly because like their locker room is usually like a small little locker room and then they're just in the tunnel. And
Mhm.
so I'm like in the tunnel and we probably spent 15, 20 minutes just talking about life. And I had actually just released my book Shatterproof, and it was kind of cool because he took interest in that and I had ended up giving him a copy of it. And we just kind of talked about life and stuff. And I remember talking to him about that specifically. And it wasn't in that instance, but I've covered several of his games since then. And it's just funny, you learn personalities of coaches. Like a good example, like Kirby Smart, like it's interesting because Kirby Smart to me in game is way more relaxed than pregame, and not even pregame, but like the day before. I remember doing interviews with him like for SEC Nation or, different things like that. And we would interview him and he was just so much more tight and rigid. And especially you're standing in like a really quiet room and like you're doing this interview and like nobody's around and it's just you and the camera person, right? And so I feel like on game day, he's a lot more laid back. And even if like the game's not out of hand and they're not like blowing the other opponent out, he's still like, like a lot more like laid back. Yeah, we're gonna go get him in the second half. We just got to da 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 da. And so it's just kind of funny, you like learn personalities of these coaches and kind of learn how to work around those personalities. And at the end of the day, you just got to learn not to take things personal.
That's what I was about to ask next. Who has been like an athlete or a coach or even like another, broadcaster, sports media figure that was completely different when you met him than what you thought he would be or she from a personality standpoint?
You know what? I'm gonna give Kirk Herbstreit some credit on this, and this is certainly like I just didn't know what to expect, right? You see his personality on TV, he's so good at his job, so buttoned up, so prepared, and really just locked in, and so I just didn't know what to expect, and so I actually did a spring game with him. and Joey Galloway and Joe Tessitore several years ago, handful of years ago. I think it was actually post COVID once again, maybe like 2021 or something like that, Alabama spring game. And so we had gotten the assignment to do that. And, again, I just didn't know what to expect. And, I was kind of told by the production crew, like, hey, Kirk will kind of lead the meetings with Coach Saban and the players. And so just, kind of let him lean in and ask questions. And then, if there's time to ask questions, you can jump in or whatever. And I mean, I really enjoyed my time with that crew. We ended up going to a baseball game. Like we just hung out. Like honestly, it felt like we've been friends for a long time, and obviously we've been colleagues for several years, but I don't cross paths with those guys a lot just because they're obviously on the bigger games and obviously college game day. And so usually we're assigned to something else. But I think that was like really cool just because, just someone that's extremely down to earth. And I think that's what I like about people. Like you get what you get. There's no facade. Like what you see on TV is what you get in person. Someone that's just laid back and just doesn't take life too seriously. Like he takes his job seriously and he does a fantastic job. But at the end of the day, like, just someone that was really just interested in like getting to know who I was and like, hey, welcome to the team. Come hang out with us. Go to a baseball game. Like, I think that was really cool because it certainly could have been the opposite, which is, hey, like, we've never worked with this girl before. We don't know anything about her. Let's go do our thing kind of situation. And that was not the case. So, I really enjoyed that. But, I think that's the cool part of just all the people I work with at ESPN. Um, it does stink because we don't get a lot of time together. We do a seminar usually once a year, and if we're in person, sometimes they're virtual. They mix it up every couple of years. We'll be in person. It is cool because you get to be in the room with everybody that you work with. But outside of that, you don't really get that opportunity, and I think that's what kind of stinks. Just even from a reporter standpoint, I have my reporter friends that I spend a lot of time talking to, texting back and forth, but we don't get to hang out like in real life a lot of times unless you make that effort and go like fly to their city or, if I'm in a particular city for a speaking event or something, I might hit up one of my friends and be like, or colleagues and be like, hey, let's go get dinner. So, that's kind of like the cool, aspect of it, but also the downside of, we're all traveling, doing the same job, just in a million different directions.
Yeah. I don't know if you've crossed paths with Pat McAfee, but he came to mind because I've heard that he's a lot more reserved and kind of laid back than you would think when he's
Yeah.
off the camera. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and I've only met him like just seen him at the seminars and that's pretty much it. And so but yeah, just like the personality. Like he's just kind of like a chill guy. Maybe he reserves some of that energy for when it's showtime. He turns it on. But it's kind of funny because like Charles Barkley is exactly the same person you see on TV. Like there is no filter.
I can
It
see
is
that.
like when the light is on, the camera light is on, like you were getting the same Charles Barkley as if you're sitting at dinner you know, hanging out. It's just, yeah, it's just kind of the way he is. But I kind of pride myself in being that way too. Like, I just kind of am who I am and like, let her rip, baby.
Yeah, for sure. I do have an interesting question for you now. You've been covering sports a long time and been on the sidelines, been around a lot of teams and players and coaches. Has there been one story that you've covered that kind of changed your mentality, outlook, what have you on athletes and coaches?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of those, and I do actually highlight a couple of those, in my book. And I think that, you know, gosh, I kind of trying to decide which way to go with this. I'll keep these short and sweet, but I'll give you a couple just because I feel like I don't want to leave one out. So one specifically, and this is a local story and one that I'm very blessed and grateful for. Timothy Alexander, one of the best tight ends in the state of Alabama, injured in a car accident, was paralyzed neck down, ended up regaining his feeling in his upper extremities, but ended up on the UAB football team under Garrick McGee. And this was someone that, literally 1 minute was taking my ticket at the UAB baseball game and then wanting to take a picture because I'm a local reporter. And then the next year he's on the football team and like not just like, hey, I'm going to be a manager. No, I have a jersey, I have a locker, like I am on the football team. And so I tell his story. And I think what was amazing from there is in a lot of ways, Timothy, shared his story and brought light to his story and to his struggles and to the ups and downs and everything in between. And really, in a lot of ways, I saw this that was kind of really a turning point in my life when I saw this ripple effect that happens when we're willing to share our stories openly and honestly. Because for so many years, I didn't share my story openly and honestly. We talk about my book Shatterproof, and I just go back to that because that is really the story of my life. And the tragedy I faced when both my parents died of prescription drug overdoses when I was a freshman in college, competing as a gymnast there. And really it was a shame that I carried for so many years because the word addiction attached to my parents. I could not own up to that because I felt like, society tells us what addiction is. And I was like, my parents aren't addicts. Like that just can't be true, right? But ultimately their prescription drug addiction, their chronic pain, going to a pain management doctor is what ultimately took them down. And, Timothy, I think in a lot of ways, seeing the ripple effect, seeing the impact of his story, seeing the hope that his story brought to people made me realize, like, wait a sec, like, people come to me to share their stories, to be a voice, to be a platform for them, to share their stories. And yet I can't even share my own story. So I think that's probably one of the biggest stories that resonates with me because I think that was kind of the jumping off point for like where I'm at today and how I view stories being so differently than what they were, right? And then the JJ Weaver story is one that I share a lot, which I love. The Kentucky linebacker had 6 fingers, used to hide from it, was bullied growing up, like literally just never showed that he had 6 fingers, would stuff 2 fingers into one finger of his glove, and he did it because he was ashamed. And I think it was just one of those things where I had the opportunity to share his story on a ESPN broadcast, and once again the ripple effect that would happen. A third grade teacher sees the story, writes into the athletic department. He goes and visits the school. The teacher was born with extra fingers on her hands, has 2 students born with extra fingers on their hands. And so this story ends up getting you know, a whole feature on College Game Day. And once again, it's like this ripple effect, right? This is like one moment in time where it's like we share someone's story and then the ripple effect. And I think about the amount of people that are impacted by this story, right? That actually get to see this. And because JJ Weaver had the courage to share his story. And I think that is like amazing. And then the last one I'll share with you really quick because this is kind of a coaching side. And I've shared this story before, but when I covered Texas A&M, Arkansas, Jimbo Fisher versus Sam Pittman, and I remember coming off the sideline to interview Jimbo Fisher, and he was just kind of hustling me. Come on, come on, come on. Got to get in the locker room, right? And I flubbed up my question. I was all like frazzled and kind of bummed out about it. And I was like, all right, move on. Well, then coming out of the locker room, I talked to Sam Pittman off camera. He gave me, oh, he had all the time in the world to sit there and talk to me. I was like, oh man, this guy, easy breezy. And then as he's walking to the bench, they're down 2 scores, Arkansas, and he's walking to the bench. All of a sudden, as I'm walking to my audio table on the opposite side of the field, I hear my name, "Hey, Lauren." And I turn around and it's Coach Pittman calling me to come back over. And we kind of meet each other back. I look up at the clock, 1 minute and 49 seconds on the clock. And he basically called me over to tell me that, "Hey, Lauren, you're really awesome at your job. I mean it." And that's what he said to me. Like, what? Like, what coach has the time and energy to like give me 2 sentences of gratitude, right? And affirmation. No coach in the history of ever has done that. And so I thought that was just really cool. When I ended up DMing him on Twitter weeks later and was just, said thank you. And he's like, it doesn't take much to let people know how much you appreciate them. And I think that was really a big lesson for me to like understand gratitude at a totally different level, that sometimes we kind of forget to say thank you, or we think, little thank you, it's not going to matter. Like, don't go out of your way. And I'm like, nope, it absolutely matters. It always matters. And so even if you just think like, that little, take the extra minute to walk across the field and say thank you. And that's what I've learned, because I think that everyone deserves to know that they're appreciated and we're all part of the operation. And so that's important to me.
Not to get too philosophical or sappy or anything, but is that not the beauty of sports? Like, especially for me growing up playing sports, you learn accountability and being a good teammate and a leader and so many different life lessons. And then, like you said, with the stories that you shared, you get to learn about other people and their stories, and it can inspire you and you know, uh, make changes in your life and other people's life for the better and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like, that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not just wins and losses and highlights, and it's a real life building experience for sure. And
Oh my
connections and
gosh.
relationships
No
and
doubt about it. Yep.
yeah.
And sports is so good for that in so many different ways. And I think that's a big reason why I kind of took this path because it definitely provides a lot of highlights in those areas and definitely is a good connector. And I think it's really cool to just sort of see what comes from it. Even if you're on the opposite sideline, rivals wearing different colors, like at the end of the day, it is something that connects us in a special way.
Yep. And if someone's on your team, you don't care what their name is, what they look like, where they're from, nothing. We're just one
Yeah.
goal, win the
Yep.
game. But
Yep. That's it.
as of this recording, obviously I probably will not post this today, but happy National Women's in Sports Day.
Aw, thank you.
That leads me into my next question. Was there, when you decided that this is what you wanted to do, was there a certain woman in sports that you kind of tried to model yourself after and learn from?
It's interesting. I don't know that there's like a specific one. I think the obvious that everybody always kind of like talks about is Aaron Andrews, right? Like um I guess, oh, Aaron Andrews, everybody wants to be Aaron Andrews. Everybody, I think it's like one of those things where it's the obvious because she was kind of the first one like to really sort of step on the scene. Not the first one because there's plenty of women that have come before her and have pioneered this sport. Your Susie Colbert's, your Leslie Visser's of the world, so many different Tracy Wolfson. Like there's so many out there, but I would just say like in general coming up, I would say who was a big influence and really kind of maybe in a lot of ways, as I was knee deep in it, Laura Rutledge was a big foundation for me, working on SEC Nation with her alongside her. She really just gave me a lot of tools and really just a lot of influence and motivation, just seeing how she operated at such a high level and just being able to watch how she really just equipped herself to be the best of the best. And it's just been fun to watch her journey and career and how much she's grown exponentially, even since we first started working together. And so, so she's somebody I definitely look up to and really admire in this space. And obviously there's so many of them, but I would say she's probably one that I've really leaned on and just, kind of used as a role model in many ways.
Yeah, I enjoy watching her on NFL Live for sure. I've met her once in Tuscaloosa. She's really nice.
She's great.
Um,
She's great. Love her family too. Her husband Josh, amazing. Her kiddos, like definitely a wonderful family. Her parents, her family, they're amazing.
aren't there some Alabama ties there with her husband
Yeah.
or something? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because her husband played at Alabama, so played baseball at Alabama. So there's definitely, and he's from the state of Alabama, so there is that connection. And they used to live here for a while, even when she was with ESPN. But then they're all up in Bristol now, up in the cold parts of the country.
Yeah, I will not be jealous of that for sure. Give me the heat. This cold weather is it's not the
No,
move.
no good,
Not
right?
the move.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Um, Real quick though, I have two more questions for you. I don't want to hold up the family dinner.
I know, family dinner. Come on,
Yeah,
my husband like texted me. He's like, "When are we leaving?" And
I
I'm like,
know.
"Dude, we got this." Like, the chips and salsa are waiting for us, but we'll get to it when we get to it.
Um, every athlete and even some coaches have a pregame ritual to get in the zone, get their mind right, everything. What do you do? What's
Okay, well,
your
you know what it is, right? The sideline shimmy. And we talked about that before, but well, let me go even
okay?
uh, further ahead of that because this will make people laugh. So the sideline shimmy is the obvious one, and that really, just for the context, is the thing that really has grounded me in so many ways because of the excitement, the adrenaline, the chaos, the pageantry, everything. Like the band is playing, people are screaming, the fans are running out, the cannons are shooting off, all the things. And the sideline shimmy really grounded me, especially early in my career, just shaking off the nerves. And yes, I still get nervous. Absolutely, I still get nervous. And so really shaking off the nerves, it doesn't make the nerves go away, but it helps to kind of redistribute those. And so actually something my therapist taught me, and I learned it more about grounding exercises. And so that's kind of cool. The other one, let's just even go before that. Pregame meal. Ready for this? Golden Corral.
Really?
Let's go.
What do you
Y'all,
get?
I love a buffet. Like I am a buffet queen, so I love a good salad bar. So like especially if you hit the Golden Corral like right when they switch breakfast to lunch, it's like you get that crisp lettuce and like I put all the toppings on it. Ranch dressing, my French dressing, I do the combo. That was like something my parents taught me, I know. And then you got to get the rolls and honey butter, like on lock, absolutely. And then it's just like a mix of things. Like sometimes I'll get a little soup. I'll get people laugh at me. They're like, "Why do you get like clam chowder at Golden Corral? Are you sure that's a safe bet?" And I'm like, "Absolutely. I'll take my chances, right?" And then like the mac and cheese, some green beans, mashed potatoes, and then of course you got the ice cream bar, right? And typically I'll go obviously get a thing of ice cream, usually grab an ice cream cone, take it in the car with me, and I'm off to my hotel to get ready for my games. So Golden Corral is it. So if it like true story, if I'm in town somewhere, I will always Google search. And if the Golden Corral, my tops is 15 minutes. Like if it's more than a 15-minute drive, I'm not going to do it because it's too out of the way and too risky if I'm going to be late for my assignment. But if it's 15 minutes or less, it's Golden Corral, baby.
Can't beat it. I haven't been to a Golden Corral in forever, but I remember as a kid talking about buffets. Do you remember Ryan's? Did you ever go to a
Yeah.
Ryan's? Yeah,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
they had some good rolls. I remember that.
Yeah.
It shut
Ryan's
down
and
or
then
something.
yeah, Ryan's isn't around anymore. We used to do Western Sizzlin' growing up, and that was like buffet slash dinner. So you would normally order like chicken fingers or a steak or whatever, and then you'd also get the buffet. And then like a pastime, you're way too young for this, but like Quincy's and Ponderosa, those were like the other two big ones. But if I'm out on the West Coast, they have the Sizzler. And so people always say, my last name is
Yeah,
Sisler.
got
Most
you.
people call me Sizzler. We going sizzling. We going sizzling. So there you go.
Got you. You got to go. Um, I don't. I know this is gonna be a question that's gonna be hard to answer in a couple minutes. But what is
We'll we'll get it done.
for the final question? What is your most memorable favorite moment of your career?
Ah. The memorable part, that's hard because there are so many moments that are just like,
I know that's a hard question to ask, but
it's crazy. No, and I mean, there are so many, but I will tell you this. I think, one of the projects that I enjoyed working on the most, and I think maybe it's just you know, uh, kind of one of those just sort of fell into it. I mean, worked hard to achieve it, but also fell into it. So this bad boy right here, my Emmy, um, sports interview discussion with Charles Barkley and Nick Saban. And so I think that's probably one of my favorites because I really kind of took the reporter hat off in that case. And I was really kind of the producer of all this. And I think what was so cool about it was getting two polar opposite personalities, Nick Saban, Charles Barkley at Coleman Coliseum together for a conversation. And so really Charles Barkley did the interview with Nick Saban, but just this conversation, I think the funniest part is like Nick Saban comes walking down the hallway and into the gym and there's Charles with standing there and like they go to hug it out and like Nick's like, real little dude and it's like kind of this awkward hug or whatever. But just hearing their conversation and it's funny because I'd asked Charles, we rode down to Tuscaloosa together. I said like, what are you going to talk to coach about? And he's like, well, I don't really want to talk a lot of football, X's and O's, ball, whatever. I want to keep it loose. But it's interesting because in the conversation, he did weave in and out of like football and serious talk. And I think that's because he knows like that is Saban's comfort zone. Saban likes to have fun, especially now in retirement, but he also like I feel like Coach Saban, Charles knew exactly where his comfort zone was and he pulled him out of his comfort zone and then put him back in it. And that's a brilliant, I mean, that's an entertainer. That is a journalist at its core. And I think he did a fantastic job with that. And it was just cool to kind of draw some of the life lessons that they were able to share together. So, I think that was a memorable moment. And on the backside of that, as time runs out here, I think what was really cool about it was the aftermath. I'd actually given Charles Barkley, we had gotten our crew at AL.com had gotten him a framed photo of him and of Saban in the stands. And I actually took it to him and gave it to him as like a gift, and he's like, "Hey, do you think that Coach Saban would sign this for me?" And I'm like, "You're Charles Barkley, like you want Nick Saban's signature." So I thought that was like really cool. And I'm like, it's cool to see like the respect that Charles has for Saban. And and then ever since then, Charles has kind of been on the regular circuit of going to Alabama, speaking to the team. That was a conversation that we had together. They wanted to get a speaker in to talk to the team, in the summer series. And, I think they were a little worried, like Charles not going to come in and talk to us. He's an Auburn guy. And Charles was like, heck no, sign me up. I'll do it. And that relationship has since blossomed with him and Nick Saban, which I think is really cool.
I remember that interview. That was a good one for sure.
Yeah.
I wish
Yeah.
I wish they would have got out there and played 1-on-1. I was a football manager at Alabama, so I know Saban's got that jumper.
I
You
know.
can't block his shot. You can't do none of that. It's just coaches, but I've heard some stories for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. You get checked. Saban calls the shots. That's he joked. He's like, is that why Kirby Smart got fired?
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously didn't get fired, but he went to Georgia instead. But it's just funny. They joke around with that. It would have been cool to see them play for sure.
It gets pretty competitive. But Lauren, I really appreciate you doing this. I would like to thank you personally for, being a mentor of mine. I really enjoyed this. I know you're super busy, but like I said, I really appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you, Skylar. The sky is a limit, pun intended. You're going places, buddy. Keep grinding, keep the axe to the ground, and you're gonna do some good stuff. So I'm excited to see. And you know where to find me. If you ever need help, I'm here. Advice, wisdom, all the things. So I appreciate you, bud.
Alrighty. Thank you. Have a good one.